Okay, we're ready. So whenever you're ready, I'll hit the start webinar and we're going live.
Okay, I'm ready.
Okay, let's do this. Okay. So good morning, everyone. I hope everyone's having an amazing day. My name is Xingjian Wang. You can call me Alan, and I'm the Director of Logistics of Project Head Conferences, Vancouver. On behalf of the executive team, we appreciate each and everyone's attendance at PT's Vancouver's track for this conference for tech entrepreneurship. We organized a variety of interactive talks and workshops, and today's session is a keynote presentation brought to us by Dr. Dianne Cyr. Dr. Cyr is a professor in the BD School of Business at Simon Fraser University in Vancouver. She began her career as a clinical psychologist and later started a consulting company specializing in how to create effective strategic alliances. After completing a PhD, she has been a professor delivering courses on leadership and serving numerous senior administrative roles in SFU. Over 20 years, her research has focused on e-commerce and the unique impact of culture and gender when building online trust and loyalty through website design. Let's welcome Dr. Cyr.
Great, thank you very much. And it's a pleasure to be here with you today and to talk a little bit about my background and my career experiences. It's not often that I step back and just talk about myself versus some of the technical topics that I would address in a conference, focused on, let's say, e-commerce or something like that. So hopefully in the next half hour, I'll talk with you a little bit about what I've done. And also because the topic is tech entrepreneurship, I'll address topics of, what I've done and what it took to get ahead in my career, and then end with some lessons learned. So hopefully there's a few little kernels in there that you can take away and incorporate into your own experiences. Because I understand that many of you are in school right now and completing courses, and you're probably thinking ahead to, what is my future going to look like? And so, it's a big question mark in many ways at this stage in our lives. And I know when I was in high school and even university, I wondered about where the path would lead. And it really is a journey. And so, I'll talk a little bit about that. So there is entrepreneurship, and pretty much everybody knows what that is. It's starting a business, it's pulling together resources, people, and finances, and things like that. But it doesn't always need to be starting your own business. It could be also something like entrepreneurship, and maybe some of you have heard that term as well, which is being entrepreneurial, but within a bigger, more established organization. And then there's a new term that I would like to introduce today, and maybe we can think about it, as we go through this session, and that is entrepreneurship. And so when I think about entrepreneurship and when I talk about that today, it's really going to be in the context of what can you do individually to manage your own career, to be creative and innovative. Because when you think about entrepreneurship or intrapreneurship, that is really the fundamental point. Like, what is it that you can do to be creative, to be different, to be ahead of the competition, to serve your customers well? And in this case, with entrepreneurship, you're kind of your own best customer. So we'll talk about that too. So anyways, after that great introduction, you can hear a little bit on the surface of what my career has been about, and then I'll dive into that a bit more in the session. But on the professional side, I am currently a professor in the BD School of Business at Simon Fraser University in Vancouver. And I've been in this role pretty much full-time since about 2002, so 20 years, and was also a professor before that. And in this role, I sort of have three main jobs. One is research, and that's e-commerce that was mentioned, and I will talk about that too. The other is administration, and currently I and at BD overall in the 20 years, I've had many senior roles where I have to take a leadership sort of stance to move things forward and to do things in a different way, which is a bit entrepreneurial or intrapreneurial. And the other part is teaching, of course. And many of you are going to be, have been at university, will be at university in the future. And so, this is your future going forward, going to technical schools or universities and learning more and getting education that will further your career so that you can, have that entrepreneurship part of your portfolio. But before being at SFU, I was at a high-tech startup university, and I've been an entrepreneur, as was mentioned, and even a prison psychologist. So I guess when you think about that on the surface, it hasn't been a very straight and narrow career. It's had all kinds of, kind of joints and turns and decision points, and some of them weren't always deliberate. Some of these have been by chance. And on the personal side, I'm actually, although I'm not in Vancouver, I'm near Vancouver. I'm on beautiful Gambier Island, which is an island quite close to Vancouver. And when I'm here, I have different hobbies and interests. I'm an artistic painter, and I have a studio, and I love to kayak, and I love to hike and garden. And for those of you who love animals, I have a little puppy called Winston. And he's a Havanese and absolutely adorable. I thought I could, if he was in my office right now, I'd show him to you, but I thought he might go a little crazy. He loves seeing other people. So that's a little brief snapshot of me. But how did I sort of get to where I am now? And a big part of it was education. I have 2 degrees, not in business, as a matter of fact. The first 2 degrees I had were in psychology. And that too was not exactly predetermined. When I first started university, I thought I would be a university professor, but I thought I would take a track that would go into English. And I was in I think my 2nd or 3rd year, and my boyfriend at the time said, "You're really good in psychology. Why don't you take more psychology courses and go into that?" And I thought, yeah, why not? And so I took a bachelor's, an honors degree actually in psychology. And then I took a year out and I worked and traveled. And then I decided to go back and do a master's degree in psychology. I left Vancouver and went out to the other side of the country to New Brunswick. And then when I was there, I decided to stay for a while. And I, quite by chance, got a job working in a maximum security prison for men. And, you might not think that would be the first choice of a young woman who's just finished a master's degree, but it was an opportunity at the time. And I thought, well, the pay was good. And I thought, I'm going to try this. And, with my entrepreneurial spirit, I suppose, because I needed to use a lot of sort of techniques, I would say, to be able to work effectively. Let's put it that way. As you can imagine, working in a maximum security prison has its challenges and can be pretty difficult. And I was a young woman. In fact, I was the first woman psychologist to work in a maximum security prison in Canada. So there wasn't exactly a blueprint to follow. And I guess getting back to tech entrepreneurship, entrepreneurship, it could be in technology, it could be in psychology, it could be in a maximum security prison. The kinds of things that you need to think about are very similar across all of these different areas. And one of the key things that I think I took away from that experience was know your customer. And in this case, it was inmates, but it was also very importantly, the security staff who worked in the organization. And so getting to know who these people were, and I could not have worked that job because I was quite restrained being in the front part of the prison, and to go to into the sort of back area, there was these, just like in the movies, big sliding gates that would come back and forth. And then I was able to go in only with a security escort, a guard. And it was really important for me to get to know the chief of security, because without that, I would not have been able to do my job effectively and to do sessions with inmates and so on, actually in the prison, although the inmates came out to visit me in my office as well, believe it or not. And so the idea of being able to work effectively involved a lot of power in politics, because you know, you need to know who's in charge, you need to know how to get things done, you need to be gracious in how you do that, and to understand what is important to you, but also what is important to the people around you. And anyone, if you're a tech entrepreneur and you are developing a new widget or a new online social media platform or whatever it happens to be, it's not only important to know your customers externally, it's really important to know the needs of the people with whom you're working so that you can be effective. You need to know, a bit about politics, which is really power in action, so that you can determine what is important for these people and what do I do in order to get things done effectively. So knowing your customer, knowing what they want, knowing what your capabilities are is extremely important. And I think the other thing that I take away from my prison experience was the importance of integrity. And of course, as every leader knows, the people with whom you work have to trust you, and you only lose trust once. And so the idea of having integrity and honor in the job is extremely important. So building on that, the next sort of thing that I did after I left the prison, I was there for about 5 years, and I came back to the West Coast because this is my home. And I became an entrepreneur. And so as an entrepreneur, I decided to start a consulting company based on the work that I had done in my PhD program. So when I first came back, I actually went back and did a PhD in business, but it wasn't straight business. It was business and psychology and also sociology. So my background was very interdisciplinary. And so I started a consulting company, and my focus was on joint ventures and strategic alliances, because that's the area in which I'd been doing my research. So here I was in Vancouver, and I interviewed a lot of CEOs in high-tech companies to find out more about this. And in starting this consulting company, I thought, okay, what are the things that I need to do? And for any of you who are starting a consulting company, it would be the same thing. What do I need to do to be most effective? And basically it's marketing myself. And for any of you who have any experience as an entrepreneur, it's tough. You need to go out, you need to network. In my case, I did a lot of networking in the high-tech community here in Vancouver. So I would go out, I would give talks, I would go to networking events to talk about what I did. I would look for opportunities to write short articles in some of the local high-tech, newsletters and that sort of thing. But it always gave me visibility, which is key. So they'd see, oh yes, okay, Dr. Dianne Cyr is doing this kind of thing, and maybe this is somebody that I would hire to help me build more strategic alliances that are effective in the future. So that's what I did, and conducted some workshops. I had to get my own letterhead made up, have design work done in order for that to happen. And so in those days, it was print media for you today, of course, everything is through social media. So you have many more platforms and a lot more opportunity for visibility. But nonetheless, the key thing, I think if there was one thing that was really important, it would be, selling yourself and making yourself visible through whatever medium that happens to be. And so, that was my involvement of being an entrepreneur. And in other ways, I guess I've been an entrepreneur most of my life, and starting small activities or helping people start small businesses. And so right around this time, I was recruited to a high-tech startup university. And maybe you might have heard of it, but probably not. It was the Technical University of British Columbia, or Tech BC. And you may not have heard of it because it was only around for about 4 years. And it was the most amazing place to work. So I talked earlier about being entrepreneurial, being innovative, and being creative, but within an existing organization. So Tech BC started from the ground up. There was nothing there, but it was very interdisciplinary too, and it was at the intersection of interactive arts, which is like interactive design, and management and technology, which was my area, and information technology. And these three areas came together, and we built courses that had elements of all three. We had a small student population. We actually got up and running within a couple of years. And the whole idea was for it to be cutting edge university. So this was back in about 1998 to 2002 that Tech BC existed. And so we also innovated not only in the kind of topics that people learn. So there was a lot of focus on design, which still exists we have one campus in Surrey outside of Vancouver, and that's where the Interactive Arts and Technology group still exists. So they do wearable devices that are set in clothing. We started that back in 2000 when it was just a glimmer in people's eyes. They hadn't really thought about that. E-commerce, believe it or not, had hardly started, although that was my area. So we really tried to think about outside the box. And the other thing that was unique about that was that we focused on online delivery. And so in those days, really no schools were doing that. And now it's so common, especially after COVID. But we delivered courses either online, 100%, or we developed courses together between the three areas, which again, interactive arts and technology, management and technology, and information technology, that brought those areas together. And it could have been a hybrid model that people would take some of the content in the classroom and some of it online. So it was kind of a really interesting, exciting place to work. And for those of us who worked there, we really felt like we were part of a startup entrepreneurial organization. And when you really love what you do, there's a fellow, big name, called Csikszentmihalyi, and he talked about the concept of flow. And flow is when you're just so absorbed in something and you love it so much that time flies and you don't even notice it. So we would be working from 9 in the morning till about 10 o'clock at night, not even noticing, what time it was, hardly stopping for lunch, but just so excited about building this new university and what it was. And for those of you who have had any experience at all in tech startups, and I know, some of you, even though you're young, have maybe thought about a company or maybe started a small company. And so, it's a very exciting thing to do. So anyways, I was involved in that. And then the government changed here in BC and Tech BC was shut down. So at that point, that's when I really started full-time at FFU. And I started my research on e-commerce at Tech BC. But the topic that I developed was looking at how we can develop e-commerce platforms through website design. So there was a creative side to this. And specifically, I looked at how do you build trust and satisfaction and loyalty in online business environments through website design. So it was all the kinds of key things that you have to do to be effective in e-commerce today, although I started that over 20 years ago. And I've been researching and publishing in this area ever since. And so my work is known by most people in the design community. And the things that I specialized in was, what around design is important, again, to build trust, satisfaction, and loyalty. And I looked at, hedonic versus utilitarian design. So how important is it that the website looks good, the visual design of it, and, the colors, the icons, the design elements, and all of that. And then I also looked at the utilitarian side, which was more the information design. So, how did that matter? The information, how it was presented, and so on. And then the third element that I looked at in terms of design was navigation design. So how do you get around the site? So these are three things that are well known in terms of e-commerce. But what I did look at that was not so well known at the time, and still I would say is not extremely adapted by all companies, is how does design differ depending on different cultures? So I looked at website localization, and I looked at and studied in many different countries to see what are the important things about visual design, navigation design, and information design that are different from one country to the next. And so there were a lot of things that differed. It's known, for example, that in China, red is a lucky color. And in North America, often red is a color that signals danger. And so if companies wanted to be successful, they need to be very aware of, what are the cultural differences in navigation as well, and in how obviously information is presented, but also in the visual design elements. And in this research that I conducted, I used systematic, surveys. I used new technology. I used an eye tracker to actually see where people looked on the design and the web page, and how that differed between different cultures. And I found significant differences between, I looked usually at Canada, Germany, Japan, the US, China, India, as well as other countries, and found significant differences. So what this says, if you are a web designer and you are looking to create a really effective website, then you need to be considering how that changes across cultures. And the other thing you need to think about is gender differences, because I studied that as well. So I looked at differences between men and women. And I even took, like these days, you take men and women out of the equation. And I actually looked at the values between masculine and feminine value orientations and found significant differences there as well. So, you need to, as an entrepreneur and a designer, think about, how is my website design going to be viewed and appreciated by different people? And how does gender and culture fit into this? So anyway, that's what I've studied for many years, and using some different methodologies as well. I've also supported both men and women in how they, move forward in their careers, and in my teaching at SFU and other places, I focused a lot on leadership. And in these leadership classes, I've taught everything from undergraduates to MBA courses. Some of the things that seemed to resonate most with the students was the effectiveness of communication. How can I be an effective communicator with my team, with the people I work with either in a startup company or an organization or even in the classroom. You know, how can I be an effective team player? And how can I be innovative and creative? And there was always an interesting kind of question that I would ask my students when we discuss a whole unit around creativity and innovation. And I would ask them, how creative do you think you are? And maybe 4 or 5 out of 40 would put up their hand and say they were creative, which is a shame, because when you think about it, most people are creative. They just don't think they are. And we would go through some exercises around creativity and what is creativity. And it doesn't have to be artistic creativity. It can be, do you have flow? Are you excited about certain things? Like, are you a great, are you a great design and draw? Can you draw really well? Are you a great cook, which is artistic? You know, are you a great game player? You know, whatever it is, whatever it happens to be, those are creative endeavors. And after the end of this unit, I'd ask people again, you know, how creative do you think you are? Or do you think you're creative at all? And almost everybody put up their hand. So people have to give themselves credit and understand that creativity has many, many different kinds of forms. So I hope that, you know, I'm just going to end with some lessons learned. But in this sort of, I talked about this being a journey at the beginning, and how, you know, being a tech entrepreneur means many things to many people. And you might have a startup, you might be an entrepreneur, but remember, I also said entrepreneurship is really important. So how do you develop your own skill set? You know, how do you become creative and innovative in your career and where you're going to go? And it may not be straight and narrow like mine wasn't. It was, you know, over here and then it was over there. And I changed from being a psychologist to being a university professor. And, you know, how do you make those decisions? So I have 6 takeaways of what I learned. And the first one was, which I don't know whether I did or not, but I think it's a great idea. Develop a clear but flexible personal strategic plan. So try and think about where you want to be, and try and think about that maybe 5 years out. And I didn't, you know, I wanted to be a university professor. I think I decided that when I was 11 years old, but I certainly had no vision of exactly what that meant, or even understanding the kind of, you know, training that I would need to get there. In my case, it was a PhD, so 12 years of university, so not for the faint of heart, but, you know, it's something that you can aspire to, but you need to have a plan. You need to decide, where am I going? What's my strategic personal plan? So the second thing is, university professors are always going to say this: get as much education as you can. I think that education is the key to so many different jobs that you can have in the future. And without it these days, you're just so limited. And there was a book that I edited a number of years ago. It was about women academics. And one of the themes that came out of that was serendipity. And serendipity is like chance encounters, things that happen on the spur of the moment, and you might not be expecting them. And one thing that was apparent in the stories of the women who shared their stories in this book was that when that opportunity came up, they were prepared. So something happens out of the blue. You know, somebody wants someone for a certain kind of job, and it's a dream thing for you that you would love to do. But unless you have the background, the education, the training, and the capability, you won't be able to grab onto it and run with it. So, you know, being prepared is key. And I think education is key to that. So, you know, get as much education as you can. The third one is, while tech skills are key to being an entrepreneur, to having a job, and for most of you, personal skills will enable you to succeed. So it's really the personal skills that will help you to get where you want to go. And of those, I think there's huge power in being an excellent communicator. When I go back to those leadership classes that I took, and these were MBA students, so they'd been out working for a long time. They had great tech skills, they had great leadership skills, but there was always room for improvement. And I think the units that resonated most with them was about communication, because everybody thinks, oh yeah, I can communicate, no problem. But when you pull back the skin like on an onion and you get down to the layers of it, there's so much to know about communication in terms of how you present yourself, how you say things, how you connect with people, how you develop those, political and power skills that I talked about when I was working as a psychologist in the prison. And then the next one, the fourth one, know your value, and focus on your strengths. There's a whole book about strength leadership, and I used to use that in the MBA program too. And so it's important, we tend to focus on the things that we don't do well. But if you want to be successful as a tech entrepreneur, you need to think about what are my strengths and build on them. Build on the strengths. You can always improve the things you don't do quite so well, but it's really important to build on your strengths. The next one, the fifth lesson I learned, is aim to have a mentor who can guide you to achieve in your goals, because I didn't have that really. And it would have made my life and my journey, my professional journey, so much simpler. So if there's somebody who you like, who is aligned in terms of values and interests and, the kind of professional skills they have, hook up with that person, because they will guide you and provide you with advice and maybe opportunities so you can get to where you want to go a little bit faster. And my last point is it won't always be easy. It won't be easy. So be passionate about what you do, be persistent, and stick with, what that personal goal is. And so, I think if you were to think about those 6 points, having a clear strategic plan, getting the education, being a good communicator with great personal skills, know your value, focus on your strengths, have a mentor, and stick with what you believe in and are passionate about, then, those are the keys to, being successful in life as well as in your professional position. So anyway, I know I had 30 minutes to talk and it's been 32 minutes, so I'm going to end there. And I don't know if there's any questions, I'm happy to take them.
Thank you so much. I think that was really very educational, like the start with you going into the industry as practical and applications, and then later taking it from more of a research point of view and being a university and producing research paper. I think it's a very cool story and very inspiring, I'm sure, for a lot of our viewers. Can I take some time to ask you a couple of questions, if you don't mind? Sure. Okay. Despite being in business school, I like your psychological take on consumer satisfaction. I wanted to ask you about your latest work at SFU, which is named Disentangling Utilitarian and Hedonic Consumption Behavior in Online Shopping. In this paper, you mentioned something called the expectation disconfirmation theory. Can you speak more about like that theory and how that reflects, more applicatively and practically from a viewpoint of website design and everything from like small psychological hints to a scale of more like, the entire system of consumer interaction? Can you speak more about how that enables us to see more in that category?
Okay. Well, this goes back, it's actually a marketing term. So, disconfirmation is when people have an expectation of what they're going to get. Let's say it's an online product. Let's say it's specific. I just bought a life jacket yesterday to go kayaking. And so I went to Amazon.com, very clear website and so on. And confirmation is that if the website is set up in a way that I'm not happy about what I get, and I expect, Amazon.com is usually really efficient, really well laid out. But let's say, for example, this particular website wasn't, or this particular product wasn't. My expectation is that I'm going to be able to go in, order something, it'll come up how many days it takes to get it, and it'll be clear how I pay. And so all of that is my expectation. But let's say it doesn't work properly. Let's say the design element, which it would be the visual design of how, I see the life jacket, is not set up so that it's clear what it looks like. In this case, there was a little video in it that was a design element that showed me how it worked and how it inflated and so on. So that was good. But let's say the video didn't work. And let's say it wasn't clear to me the specifications of the life jacket. Then that would disconfirm my expectation of either quality or specifications or so on. And I probably would get pretty upset with Amazon. And so I would go away, and instead of having a positive experience of it being, being satisfied about the product and that the utilitarian elements of the website were good in terms of what it said, how it said it, the specifications, and the design element in this case would have been the video and the pictures of the people wearing the life jacket. And if maybe that wasn't there, or it looked ugly, or it didn't appeal to me personally as a woman, or maybe culturally, then that would disconfirm my expectations of what I usually would expect on Amazon.com. And so coming back to there was in this particular study, it's a while ago now, so I can't remember all the different elements that we looked at, but there was a whole list of design elements around, colors. And another thing that we studied was something called social presence, which is the warmth and sociability of the website. So do I feel good when I go there? Does it appeal to me? And so there was all the hedonic side of it, which is the experiential side. And then there was the utilitarian side, which is the navigation, the information, and so on. And all of that would need to meet my expectations if I would be satisfied, trust, and be loyal to the website. And so in various ways, various elements, we would study them, we would mix and match them, but basically looking at what was important for people to go back to the website in the future. And of course, for e-commerce websites, it's huge, because if people are dissatisfied, you go to a website, and you've probably experienced this yourself. If you don't like the designs, you don't like the color, or heaven forbid, you can't find what you're looking for in the site, it takes you all of like 5 seconds to leave, right? So, and probably you wouldn't go back there in the future, which is online loyalty. And in some of the early works that we did, this cost companies so much money, because once you lose a customer, you've lost their revenue for the future. On the other hand, if your expectations are confirmed and you like what you see, you're able to navigate, get your product, and it appeals to you culturally, let's say again, which is a lot of the work that I did, then you're going to go back again in the future. And so companies do need to think about that. And now I've done all the research on this. You just have to go and read about it, and that will give website designers clues about academic research. Because in the early days, when I started this back in about 1990, there were very few systematic studies, believe it or not, that people would look at websites and say, well, yeah, I like the colors, but they wouldn't know why, or they wouldn't test specifically, between one group of people and the next, and so on. Right. Does that answer your question?
I think it absolutely does. Definitely a lot of people overlook that kind of aspect when they're putting out websites. Like right now, for an age where we're relying a lot of our interaction with online companies through websites, it basically is a blend or embodiment of your shop design, your aesthetic, and also your customer service in most cases, because those chat boxes that you use to problem shoot and select your items, for example, from a shop, and really,
Right.
really important. And I'm kind of surprised that, of course, there weren't that many systematic research conducted about this. So
Well,
yeah,
don't forget, back in 1990, e-commerce was just starting. So
that's
I
true.
know that seems like a long, long time ago, and it was in e-commerce years, but it was the early days in the late 80s and early 90s of just getting started in e-commerce. So things have evolved over time. But even still, I would say today, many companies don't pay attention to differences across cultures, and it does make a huge difference. And if that makes a difference, then it means people will come back to your website and visit in the future. Then I think companies should be taking a look at that and make sure that their sites are localized for the local clientele.
Mm. Yes, definitely. I think that's where kind of your psychological background definitely contributed a lot to this, right?
Yeah, you
So
can
yeah.
see where the psychology kind of came into the
Mm.
business side of it for sure. Yeah.
Absolutely. Um, okay, so the next question, I kind of want to ask about these hedonistic, I guess, expectations. We would say like it's kind of emotional things that we want. And of course, this exists between consumers, mass consumers, and big companies, but also you also mentioned your consulting in strategic alliances. Are there any of such thing in between like big companies, their communication at all, or is it mostly rational because they have teams trying to determine the best choices economically for their company?
Hmm. So the question is around what's most important in setting up effective strategic alliances?
Yes, and also whether there's hedonistic like influences in intercompany communications, I guess.
Right. Well, when I was looking at strategic alliances, these were between some smaller, but some bigger companies. The ones, when I did the research on this in the Vancouver area, they were in high-tech companies, all of them. And it was more on the leadership side. So what were the elements? Well, a little bit broader than that, a bit about the technology and the people who worked in technology too. So what were the elements that would make this successful? And of all the things, the one thing that was essential if the alliance was to be a workable and a success in the long run is that the two top people who were in the alliance together got along. So this comes back to the interpersonal skills and the communication. So if, let's say, you had two some of them were medical technology companies. So let's say you had two people, both in medical technology, with different technology, but complementary, which was another key thing actually on another level. But there had to be a good reason for these companies to come together. But once the technology was decided, and yes, indeed, it would be complementary, then the number one thing was that the people involved, either in the teams or the leaders at the top, they liked one another and could work effectively. So it was very personal, and it depended on effective communication and setting up those communication links actually, so that the CEO and the other CEO had direct links. But further down, the tech teams also had to make sure they had clear lines of communication, because sometimes it didn't always happen that way. And when it didn't, it was to the detriment of the alliance. So it really was, having the right choice, let's say, of a partner to start with. It could be around technology, but it could also be market access. Some of the Vancouver companies partnered with a US company so that they automatically had a network in the other country. So there had to be a good reason, let's put it that way, for the alliance to start. But then it was, how do we set up communication channels? If there are power and politics issues, how do we deal with those? How are we transparent? Making sure that even nowadays it's easy with Zoom and technology, but making sure that the technical side is in place so that the communication can be easy and effective. All of that was absolutely important.
Absolutely. And can you probably extend more, do you have any examples of modern companies or leadership structures that kind of reflects this?
Well, let me think. I haven't done research in this area for a while, and I'm just trying to think of off the top of my head about some companies that, well, almost any companies are involved in strategic alliances now, because not that many companies can do it alone. And so basically the kinds of things that I just mentioned around, the people and the technology, all of the things that I studied then would hold today in modern, alliances. It doesn't have to be technology, it could be anything.
Absolutely. Okay, so I think I have one last question.
Okay.
So yes, you are a strong advocate for strong interpersonal skills, as in the beginning of the interview, we kind of saw that, and I'm sure it reflects in the programs that you've led. And as you move from industry to education, bring some of your expertise, can you talk more about curricular structures, what courses we have to take if we're to be in the business technology management program where you were the academic director of?
Right. You've done your background and your research. Good for you.
I looked a little bit. Yeah.
Well, I think, because of my background in psychology, in the business faculty, it's kind of interesting. I'm in the management information systems area because of my research in e-commerce. But the courses that I teach are on the people side. So I've taught everything from organizational behavior, which is about, what you do in a company to be effective on the personal side, to human resource management and leadership. And I guess I really like teaching the leadership courses. And I would encourage anybody, even though on the technology side, to take courses that will let you be a better people person in the organization. And yes, I was the director for about 5 years of a business technology management program at SFU. And we had a board of people who guided the program, but the focus really was on MIS students who had the technology side and bringing them together and taking courses on the people side. So that was leadership and organizational behavior. And the reason we set this program up in that way is that we realized for a lot of people, I mean, you may be great and skilled as a technologist, but it's important to translate that technology into the systems in an organization. And to do that, excuse me, you need good people skills. So we deliberately set this up so that, people would take technology skills, but they would take people skills. And so, in your own schools, and universities, if you could take organizational behavior, which is where you start, usually in second year, and that will give you different courses around power and politics, communications, creativity, innovation, and so on, the things I've talked about, then I would highly recommend it. And as you go further, along in your university education, I know there's a lot of pressure to focus on certain topics and take maybe more and more technology. But if you can take a few more people courses, especially around teamwork and team building, then I think that in the end, if you're a tech entrepreneur or if you're a, intrapreneur or even an ultrapreneur, as I mentioned right at the beginning, then that will serve you very well. And I think based on the experience of the people who went through the business technology management program at SFU, that, they got great jobs and they were very effective in them.
Thank you. And lastly, do you have any advice for, I mean, you've already shared a lot of good advice and experiences, but for, I guess, people following Project Tech conferences, since we are an organization that promotes awareness in tech in, among high school students, how do you, do you have any advice on how we continue to do this and specifically entrepreneurship within tech?
Well, I think, if I were to sum it up, I did offer some lessons learned, but, as you go forward with your education, think about what your passion is. What do you really love to do? And I mentioned earlier, focus on your strengths. And so kind of figuring that out is not always so easy. And so maybe asking people around you, what do you think I'm good at? And it gets some external validation of, where do you think you might like to go? Because often we don't ask those questions. We're so busy with just kind of, day-to-day things and moving along that we don't take the time to step back and reflect. And I think reflection is really important. In many of my classes, I actually ask my students to write a journal about the different things that they're experiencing in the classroom and the topics. And whether you write a journal or not, it's up to you. But I think reflection on, where do I want to go? What do I think I would like to do in 5 years? And how might I get there is a key question. And often we don't step back and ask that. And so we might end up getting somewhere that we don't intend because we haven't taken the time to reflect. So perhaps that would be one final note to end on.
Absolutely. I think it's very appropriate to end on there. Thank you so much, Dr. Cyr, for such an amazing presentation. Of course, I was sure everyone here watching will be able to learn a lot about e-commerce, the psychology aspect of business management. Of course, we gained a lot of valuable knowledge. And of course, at the end or throughout the entire presentation, I really like your emphasis on the interpersonal skills that although tech is expanding, they have stayed true and since forever, and they will continue to stay true for hundreds of years to come, in organizations and just in general. So I thank you a lot for that. And seeing that we have no further questions, we will move on to the closing remarks. Thank you all for attending today's session with PTC Vancouver. We hope you had a great experience hearing from Dr. Cyr. Our next session is on July the 28th at 8 a.m. Pacific time with Vina Lanz, where we have her presenting. And we hope to see you again. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us on Instagram at PTC Vancouver. And once again, thank you for taking the time to participate in PTC Vancouver's theme of tech entrepreneurship. Thank you so much, Dr. Cyr.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.